Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, and not just any old episode. This is episode 500. 500, I've been doing this for nearly 10 years. I would have been 43 when I did the first episode of Mingles, which wasn't even called Mingles with Jingles back then. It's called Q&A with the Mighty Jingles, and one of the questions was, what should we call it? And you guys came up with Mingles with Jingles. I can't even remember what it was like being 43. Wow. Yeah. My, how time flies. They grow up so fast. Well, it's October. Halloween's coming up. And of course, all of your favourite games are doing Halloween-inspired stuff. World of Warships is trotting out although they have updated it, it's not just exactly the same Halloween thing that they do every year. You've got the Escort the Transylvania thing. All kinds of games are doing horror-inspired stuff. But the one that I wanted to talk about was World of Warcraft, or specifically Wrath of the Lich King Classic. World of Warcraft's always been very good at doing seasonal stuff. It's like there's a new seasonal event happening every month. And for Halloween, they have a special boss who appears in the Scarlet Monastery dungeons, the Headless Horseman. And he drops all kinds of really cool loot. There's a sword, there's a collection of rings, there's a helm. It's a plate armor helm that can only be equipped by warriors, paladins, and death knights. But if you can equip it, and you do, and you use it, it mimics the Headless Horseman's ghostly laugh. There's cool stuff like that. There's a sinister squashling pet that you can get. But most importantly, you can get the Headless Horseman's flying mount. So it's a real popular dungeon to do. And at current gear levels, it only takes you something like 30 seconds to kill him. And you can do it on every character. So if you're somebody like me, and you've got 9 characters in Wrath of the Lich King Classic at maximum level, that's 9 chances a day, every day for the duration of the Halloween event, which lasts a couple of weeks. 9 chances per day to get that mount. So I've been doing it every day since the start of the event, and the game's trolled me pretty hard already. I've had the plate armor helmet drop 3 times on characters who cannot actually equip plate armor helms. The first day I did it, I think I was on my shaman. There was one of the druids in the group. The mount dropped for them, and they already had it from the day before. So they tried, bless them, to trade it with me, but of course it's bind on pickup, so you can't actually trade it to anybody. But hey, at least they tried. So I haven't actually seen the mount yet, but I'm going to be trying it again as soon as I've finished this episode of Mingles with Jingles. But one of the other things that is kind of important to this story is the Halloween event also coincided with the introduction of the new random dungeon finder tool. The whole thing's there to make getting a group together for a dungeon as quick and seamless as possible. And it does do a very, very good job. Almost all of the time. So how it works is you pick your role, so whether that's tank, healer, or DPS. Obviously tanks and healers are going to get faster queues, but that's not really too much of an issue. I'll explain why. You can either queue up for a random dungeon, just take the luck of the draw, or pick a specific dungeon. And then you hit the, okay, I'm ready, let's queue up button. And then you can just carry on doing your normal business. If you're queuing as a tank, the queues are just about instant. The queues for healers are relatively short, specifically because, of course, there's less tanks and healers around. But even if you're queuing as a DPS, and you might have to wait 8, 9, maybe 10 minutes for the tool to put a group together, it doesn't matter, because you can just carry on playing the game while you wait for the queue to sort the group out. As soon as the tool's got a group ready, it notifies everybody in the group, says, are you ready to join? And once everybody confirms, it teleports the entire group straight into the start of the dungeon. You don't even have to go to the dungeon, it just takes care of it all for you. Sounds really good, Jingles. Where's the downside? Oh, I'm getting to that. 95% of the time, this is a really, really good new feature. I mean, it's not a new feature, it's been around forever, but it's new in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. The vast majority of the time using this tool, you're going to probably spend anything between 5 and 10 minutes going about your business, waiting for the tool to put the group together. then the tool will notify you the group's ready, everybody clicks accept, and off you go, you do your dungeon. The dungeon will take anything from 15 to 30 minutes, depending on who's in the group and how hard the dungeon is, and then once everybody's done, it puts you back to exactly where you were before you joined the dungeon, and then you can queue for another dungeon, and this will be fine, because most dungeons are going to take you anything between 15 to 30 minutes to do. And there's a limit on how many dungeons you can do in the space of an hour. 5 dungeons per hour. So this limit is normally never going to affect you. Obviously, Blizzard don't want their servers melting under the strain of people spamming dungeons all the time, but since most dungeons at the appropriate level are going to take long enough to do that nobody's ever going to do 5 of them in an hour, this kind of limit was only really imposed in order to prevent people from spamming low-level dungeons multiple times in an hour, just running through and nuking everything in those dungeons in order to farm rare loot that can be sold on the auction house or cosmetic stuff. So that's the only, under normal circumstances, real limitation that you're going to run into. So during the normal course of events, this 5 dungeons per hour limitation is never going to affect anybody. During the normal course of events. But Blizzard keep putting these seasonal dungeons in. In fact, they're not even new dungeons. They just take an old existing dungeon and they put a seasonal boss in. And the Dungeon Finder tool takes you straight to that seasonal boss. In the case of the Headless Horseman, a seasonal boss that only takes 30 seconds to kill and loot. Yeah, but Jingles, I mean, you can only loot the boss once per day. You can queue for it as many times as you like, but you'll only get the loot bag the first time you kill him each day. So each character only gets 1 chance per day to get that mount. Queuing multiple times on the same character is a complete waste of time. Yeah, that's very true. And if the limitation was 5 dungeons per hour per character, that would make perfect sense and it wouldn't affect anybody. But it isn't, is it? It's 5 dungeons per hour per account. So I found this one out the hard way. As I logged on first on my Shaman, then on my Death Knight, then on my Warrior, then on my Rogue, then on my Priest, then I tried to queue up on my Paladin, and it didn't say why it wouldn't let me queue, it just wouldn't let me queue. And I had to find out the hard way that because I'd already done this one 30-second long dungeon 5 times in the previous 10 minutes, the game wouldn't let me queue for another dungeon, any other dungeon, not just the seasonal dungeon. I couldn't queue for any other dungeon on any character for another hour. So, from a certain point of view, literally my point of view, and the point of view of anybody with more than 5 characters on their Wrath of the Lich King Classic account, is that Blizzard just introduced a random dungeon finder tool, a tool that is supposed to be there to make it quick, seamless, and easy for you to get into dungeons, but which in effect is actually preventing you from getting into dungeons. Well played, Blizzard. You did it again. While we're on the subject of stuff, well, I was searching for a good segue there, but no, it's got nothing whatsoever to do with a dungeon finder tool that prevents you from getting into fucking dungeons, no. But in Starfield. So, as many of you know, I've been playing and enjoying Starfield. I mean, there's nothing revolutionary about it. It's basically Bethesda playing it safe and giving us more Skyrim, more Fallout 4, except in space. And that's absolutely fine. It does exactly what it sets out to do. However, I'm on my first New Game Plus playthrough, which means I've already completed them. Don't worry, there's going to be no spoilers here. I'm on my first New Game Plus playthrough, which means I have basically finished the story, and you get the option to start again, but retaining some of the stuff that you got from your first playthrough. Anyway, none of that's relevant to what I'm about to show you, because I'm going to show you something rather than just tell you about it. So I saw something on the PC Gamer News website, and it was to do with somebody who'd modified one of the standard weapons in the game. And when I say modified, I don't mean he downloaded and installed a mod for the game that, you know, actually changed the game in any way. I mean, you can do that in Starfield. You've been able to do that in pretty much all Bethesda games. If you want to. And it doesn't really matter because it's a single-player game. It's not like you're going to be messing anybody else's fun. But if you want to, you can take all the challenge out of it by installing mods that make your character completely overpowered. And if you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. I do run the game with some mods installed, but nothing like that. I've got the UI overhaul, which is very helpful. Oh, where the hell did he come from? Oh, okay, yeah. I guess the burst fire mode is absolutely useful on this particular sniper rifle because the second and third shot go absolutely nowhere near what you aimed at, thanks to the recoil. And what I'm going to show you, by the way, is related to this, modifying your weapons. But modifying your weapons using the tools that are built into the game. Nothing, overpowered, no mods, nothing. And it's to do with the Coachman double-barreled shotgun, which is well, if I'm being completely honest, it's not really that good a weapon, which is probably why this particular combination of mods went undiscovered for as long as it did. Because, I mean, the game's been out a while. It's still a new game, of course, but I'd never heard of this combo. Probably because, I mean, the Coachman, it's a double-barreled shotgun. And it's horrendously inaccurate, but devastatingly powerful close-up. So, it has its place, but it's only got 2 shots. So if you run into a room and there's more than 2 enemies, you're going to get screwed while you're reloading. There are other shotguns in the game that are generally far, far better. Even the Old Earth shotgun, which is basically, I think, a pump-action Remington. Very, very good early on in the game. And then, of course, you've got the Breach semi-automatic magazine-fed shotgun, which is stupidly powerful and also pretty accurate. And you can fire slug rounds, and it's actually a pretty effective sniper rifle. But, none of that applies to the Coachman double-barreled shotgun. So you can get one of these quite easily. If it doesn't drop as loot, which it probably will, you can always head to Laredo Firearms on Aquila City, on the planet Cheyenne, and you'll end up there at some point very early on because numerous different quests will take you there. And the Laredo Arms shop, they're the manufacturers, they'll quite happily sell you one. The thing that makes this shotgun special is one of the ammunition modifications that you can make for it, and it only requires a couple of points in the science tech tree. Anybody can do this to the shotgun. It requires some relatively simple to get resources in order to actually build the modification. And the mod that I'm talking about here is the Hornet rounds. So by default, the weapon fires buckshot. You can also get slug ammunition for it, although why you would, I don't know. But it's the Hornet rounds that make this thing special, because what the Hornet rounds do is that they convert the ammunition into kind of like an explosive charge that detonates downwards from the point of impact. And because it has a maximum range, which isn't particularly long, the point of impact can be the sky. Let me just show you what this thing can do. And remember, there are no external mods installed. I mean, there are, but nothing that affects the way this shotgun works. This is just something that this shotgun can do if you've installed the Hornet round ammunition. It's like artillery. It's like I'm launching artillery airburst strikes. Every time you see that XP awarded thing pop up in the middle of the screen, I've killed something. Right? I'm not even aiming. I mean, this is definitely something that comes in extremely useful in a target-rich environment. Outdoors, you do not want to be using this thing indoors. But when you've got, I don't know, an ecliptic mercenary base to clear out, and you absolutely definitely have to kill everything without any skill whatsoever, the Coachman double-barreled shotgun with Hornet rounds. Accept no substitutes. This thing is just hilarious. And, I mean, it's a single-player game, so it doesn't make any difference. But, wow, where has this thing been all my life? Anyway, I'm going to leave this running. Might be a bit of a distraction when you see the absolute carnage that this thing is capable of dishing out. But we'll leave this running in the background while I slaughter an entire regiment of mercenary troops I mean, I don't even know there's anybody up there. I'm just hosing it around at random. I'm getting kills. And whoop, be real careful, of course. As this thing goes off close to you, it will mess your day up too. But we'll leave this running in the background while we crack on with the rest of this week's news. Oh, actually, before we move on, and again, I'm going to keep this spoiler-free, but while we're on the subject of stuff that's broken, this ecliptic military base, at this point in the playthrough, you're not supposed to be able to get here. There's one of the main quests in the story that does involve getting here, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that you're supposed to do first before you can even land on this planet. And at this point, because I was literally just randomly looking for planets with military garrisons on that I could attack in order to demonstrate this ludicrously powerful shotgun. And I thought, oh yeah, this one will do. And it wasn't until I actually landed and started clearing it out, I thought, I recognise this place from my first playthrough. I haven't actually yet done the stuff that I'm supposed to have to do in order to land on this planet. But the game just lets you land on the planet anyway. GG Bethesda, keep doing what you do. Right, anyway, so moving on swiftly. You might have heard the news that Epic is running out of money. Yes, that Epic. You know, the ones who make Fortnite, which is basically just a license to print money. They recently fired 800 of their employees as a cost-saving measure. Because despite the fact that Fortnite is basically bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars every month, they're spending money faster than they're earning it. Why this would come as a surprise to anybody, I have no idea. Because that's basically been their entire business strategy ever since launching the Epic Games Store. They've been offering fantastically good offers to game developers in order to get Epic Games Store exclusives. They've been giving away free games left, right and centre, and all of this in order to build a foothold in the marketplace, which they have succeeded in doing. But they're bleeding money like you wouldn't believe. Taking on Apple, I suppose, was never a really smart bit, because they did that, didn't they? They deliberately defaulted on the terms of service for publishing stuff on the Apple Game Store in order to force a lawsuit with Apple, and that's cost them hundreds of millions of dollars, and they haven't been successful, so that probably wasn't a particularly smart move. But the fact remains, they're spending money faster than they're earning it, and it's finally caught up to them and is biting them in the arse. Although it hasn't bitten them in the arse as much as it's bitten the arses of the 800 employees that they just had to fire in order to stop hemorrhaging money all over the place, which is a bit of a bummer, but there it is. Notice it's always the employees that suffer, it's never the executives. Yeah, anyway. So, no more free games on the Epic Games Store, I suppose. Except, yes, they haven't stopped doing that. They're still giving games away, which I suppose is good news for us. And given that it's October, the month of Halloween, you can now get The Evil Within 100% completely free on the Epic Games Store. And next week, they're giving away the sequel, The Evil Within 2, and they're both really good games. They're both horror games, of course, so don't expect to see me playing them anytime soon. I still haven't gotten over the trauma inflicted on me by Alien Isolation. Although, I don't know, I mean, I'm not promising anything, alright, but I might, maybe, possibly, do something with Alien Isolation for Halloween. I'm not promising anything. Whatever I do, I might not last long, and it might be very short. But yeah, we'll think about it. I mean, Halloween's only once a year. As long as I'm playing during the daytime, not on headphones. How bad can it be, right? Actually, it can be pretty bad. This would not be the first time I've tried to go back and redo Alien Isolation. In fact, it wouldn't even be the second or third time. And every time I get to medical, every time I get to the medical wing and that alien comes out for real, nope, I just can't do it. But we'll see what happens, alright? Again, not making any promises, but we'll see what happens. In the meantime, The Evil Within, free on the Epic Games Store, and next week, The Evil Within 2, also free on the Epic Games Store. While we're on the subject of horror games, Alan Wake 2 is coming out, I think, next week. So the original Alan Wake by Remedy was a fairly successful horror game when it first came out. It was fairly inevitable that there was going to be a sequel, although Remedy have taken their sweet time getting it out. But what's inspiring horror amongst gamers with regards to the sequel, Alan Wake 2, it isn't the story, it isn't the monsters, it isn't the enemies, it's the minimum system requirements. Get a load of this, holy shit. The bare minimum system requirements to even install the game is an Intel i5-7600K processor, or AMD equivalent, a GeForce RTX 2060 or Radeon RX 6600, 16GB of RAM, 90GB of solid-state storage, so hard drive owners. I mean, I know it's 2023, everybody should be running SSDs by now, but hard drive owners can forget it. Now, admittedly, those are not particularly steep system requirements, but remember, these are absolute bare minimum system requirements. An RTX 2060, 90GB of SSD space, and that's just to get the game running at 1080p with 30 frames per second and everything turned down to low graphics settings. That's what you need just to install the game and have it running like a slideshow of a dog's turd. The recommended system settings to play at 1080p with 60 frames per second and medium graphics are a Ryzen 7 3700X or Intel equivalent, a GeForce RTX 3070 or a Radeon RX 6700 XT, 16GB of RAM and 90GB of SSD storage. If you fancy taking a bit of a risk, pushing the boat out and playing the game on ultra graphics settings, and by that we mean 4K resolution at 60 frames per second with the high, not the ultra, just the high graphics preset, you're going to need a Ryzen 7 3700X or Intel equivalent, an RTX 4070 or a Radeon RX 7800 XT. That's a £500 to £600 graphics card alone just to be able to play the game on ultra settings. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but Jingles, these are ultra settings. I mean, that doesn't sound unreasonable. Well, yeah, but this is without ray tracing turned on. If you want to play with ray tracing on at anything better than 1080p resolution and 30 frames per second, you are going to need a GeForce RTX 4080. That's a graphics card that costs more than most people's PCs. Holy shit. Well, yeah. Be interesting to see how many copies of Alan Wake 2 they managed to shift with those kind of systems. Well, not specifications, requirements. I'll probably be giving it a miss, though. I mean, I could technically, because I've got a 3080. I mean, I'm not going to be playing it with ray tracing on. But then again, I don't even play Cyberpunk with ray tracing on anymore. Just basic raster shading. With a 3080, the game looks amazing. And it runs at a nice comfortable 60 frames per second while looking great. If I turn ray tracing on, I barely notice the visual difference. Well, I do. I don't notice any actual improvement in the graphics, but I notice the frame rate tanking. So that's with a 3080. I mean, it's not a new card anymore, but it's still pretty good. And I'm certainly in no rush to upgrade just for Alan Wake 2. I mean, £1,500 for a 4080. Holy shit. I've got a mortgage to pay for. I can't afford to be spending that amount of money on a new graphics card. So yeah, I'll probably be giving Alan Wake 2 a miss. At least until the next generation of graphics cards come out and I can finally afford to upgrade to a 4080. But anyway, yeah, I guess that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.